Portugal is a country famous for the fortified wines of Port, Madeira, and the lesser-known Moscatel de Setúbal. With almost 200,000 hectares of vineyards, it's one of the top 10 wine-producing countries on the planet. It's a country that's near and dear to my heart. It's a place that I think I'm going to live at least part of the year someday. People and the wines there are fantastic, and there's so much more than Port and Madeira. Here today, we're going to blind taste two high-end red wines. While there's a variety of different terroirs in Portugal, two of the most important regions, especially for reds, are the Douro and the Douro. The Douro is near the city of Porto. It's where port wine is made, with 45,000 hectares of vineyards and steep slopes. For me, it is the most beautiful wine region that I've ever seen. The Douro is broken into three different parts. First, you have Baixa Corgo, which is closer to the city of Porto. It's a little bit wetter. That's where more mass-produced port wines are made. You have Cima Corgo, which is in the middle. That's where you get a lot of great port wines and dry wines. And then inland towards the border of Spain is the Douro Superior. And a lot of producers tell me that that's the best place for dry wines. There are over 100 permitted varieties in the Douro. Some of the more famous ones are Touriga Nacional, Touriga Franca, Tinta Roriz, which is also known as Tempranillo, Tinta Barroca, and a slew of others. I've been to the Douro many times in my wine career, and it never gets old. Just south of that is a region called the Douro. The Douro is really coming to the forefront in the minds of the international wine community. It's known kind of as the Burgundy of Portugal. In the 1950s up to the 70s, there were a lot of cooperative wineries established there. In the past, the Douro was known as cheap wines. Now that's changing as there's a lot of high quality wines coming out of the Douro. About 80% of the production is red, although the white grape and Cruzado make spectacular Burgundy-like barrel-fermented white wines. Like in the Douro, the best red wines are traditionally blends based on Touriga Nacional, Tinta Roriz, also known as Tempranillo, also Jaén, which is known as Mencia across the border in Spain, and also a high-acid red grape called Afroshire. There's about 20,000 hectares of vineyards there. A lot of producers own less than a hectare of vineyards, so there's a lot of small farmers. Even though there are a lot of vineyards there, when you're up in the region, a lot of the vineyards are kind of hidden in between the forests and pine trees. By the way, the pine note is something that I pick up a lot on when it comes to red wines from the Douro. In the Douro, producers tend to lay back on the oak, especially with red wines. Cool thing about the Douro is you can find old vintages of these red wines throughout Portugal in wine bars and wine shops. I think last time I was there, I had a 1985 Douro for like 50 euros, which is pretty mind-blowing. Portugal has been projected as the next big thing in the wine world, although it still really hasn't taken off, and I don't know why. The wines are wonderful. Portugal is known for a country that produces outstanding value for money. Here today, though, we have some pretty expensive wines. A lot of producers are making ambitious wines to improve the image of the country's wines. You can see I'm super excited about Portugal. I'm excited to taste these wines. Let's get going. Tasting out of my Spiegelau Definition Bordeaux glasses, big bowl. These should work really well. They're thin, light, affordable. I really love these glasses. I have a link in the description box if you want to check them out. As always, I Coravin these and had somebody mix them up for me. Traditionally, Portuguese red wines are pretty plush, really mouth-filling, really dark. I really like in Portugal that locals expect the best wines to be blends, not single varietal wines like is the case in most of the world. Let's get going with wine number one here. Wine number one. It smells, it's just got so many red berry characteristics. Dark red cherry, dark red raspberry. There's a little bit of tangerine peel. There's like a lot of mineral notes. It smells fantastic, like really high quality. Maybe a touch of dark chocolate, but not a lot of wood here at all. It smells awesome. These red wines from Portugal are concentrated and big, but they're not really ever clumsy. This even has a touch of like perfume and just a touch of rose petal in it too. Complex wine. Let me give us a taste here. Oh, it's tangy, mouth-filling. These are like the perfect kind of tannins that I like to see in red wines. It's so funny, these tannins are almost refined in a way, almost like the wine has some age, although these are young wines. They're small, they're not too biting, they're grippy, the finish is extremely long. Another cool thing about Portugal, there's a lot of traditional winemaking. In the Douro, for instance, a lot of ports and dry wines are still foot trodden because the foot is the perfect shape to stop on the grape without crushing the seed, so you don't get those astringent tannins. It happens in the Alentejo too, in the south. In the Alentejo, they even have an appellation dedicated to wines made in amphora, Vinha d'Italia, which they call them, which I love those wines. This is a stellar wine. I love how Portuguese red wines taste like dry versions of port, which makes sense because they're the same grape variety. That is stellar. Let's move on to wine 2. Wine 2 is different than wine 1. I think wine 1 was, to me, a stereotypical Douro type of wine. This leads with more mineral type notes. Mineral, black raspberry, red plum even. Wine number 1 is a little bit more floral. Wine 2 has a lot more mineral type characteristics. It's also a little bit shy. It's not as explosive as wine 1 on the nose, but still, it smells good. I love the red berry fruits. Oh, Portuguese wines are so unique because they're dark, they're inky. Touriga Nacional, Touriga Franca are small berries with dark skins, and sometimes when you're tasting a lot of wines in Portugal, your teeth can get stained pretty well, but they still manage to have red fruit flavors. And if you know me, I'm all about sour cherry red fruit flavors more than black fruit. Completely different experience on this wine. This is terroir, terroir, terroir. It's more mineral driven. Wine 1 is more fruity and plush. This is hard for me. I feel like wine 2, it's just a touch leaner. It's got some bigger tannins, more aggressive tannins. Let me go back to wine 1 here. These are some sick wines. Man. If you want to hang out with me and other fellow wine geeks, check out channel memberships in the second tier, the Grand Reserve tier. I've organized a monthly live hangout tasting where you can come up on screen, hang out, share your wines. We can just talk shop. I've also launched a live video podcast. Members of the Grand Reserve tier can come up on screen and ask a question, call in like a live radio show. It also supports the work I do here, so thank you. This to me is fun because you really see the differences in wines here. Wine 2, it's just so mineral. This is for more wine geeks. I think wine 1, everybody's gonna like. It's plush, it's fruity up front. Wine 2 is more mineral driven, which I really like. It almost reminds me kind of some of those slaty mineral notes that you get in the Mosel. The Douro does have slaty soil, so maybe that's the case. But however, I think this is gonna be the Dow. Let's go. Really tough here. These are ridiculous wines, like ridiculous. It just shows that Portugal can create dry red wines among some of the greatest wines in the world that have character. I'm gonna go 95, 94. These are awesome wines. The price reflects that. Let's go with wine 2. I think that this is the Dow. We'll see here. 94 points. So this producer, this wine is made by Pedro from Herdade de Rosim, which he's in the Alentejo, but he makes wines all over the place. Makes wines in Italia. I think this is very interesting. This wine is called the O Estrangeiro from the Dow, which I was right, 2022. This comes in at $52. It's an old vine field blend. Doesn't even have the varieties on the label. Doesn't even have the varieties listed on his website because it's a mix, and that's what happens a lot in Portugal. You have all these interplanted varieties. This is the old school way of making wine. You just have a bunch of varieties planted. You harvest them, you co-ferment them together. Pedro is really active on social media. He even runs an amphora wine day in the Alentejo. I got to get there at some point. This comes in at $52, 13% alcohol. Again, I said that it was a little bit leaner in style. Not leaner, but it was a little bit more medium bodied than this one in style. I thought this is fantastic. I know $52 I know is not cheap, but that is serious red wine. And the cool thing about Portuguese wines, it's just like the perfect bridge between people that if you like Napa Cab, California Cab, but you also like European wines, if you blend the two styles together. I think that was outstanding wine. Okay, here, wine 1, I gave 95 points. That's a whopping score, and I know what it is. I thought it was the Douro. It was the stereotypical Douro flavors, and look who it is. I love this producer. The first time I went to Portugal, and when I was just a tourist, a visitor, I went to a wine bar, and I remember the wine shop owner was like, oh, you could check out these wines. They're made by my friend, which I thought they were good. It was the Wine and Soul Pintas. That was one of their first wines. This is made by George. I've had dinner with several times. Also his wife Sandra, who I believe used to be a model. Really friendly people, make real soulful wines. Also make a great white wine called Guru. I think this is fantastic. This is the Wine and Soul Quinta da Manuela, Vinhas Velhas from the Douro 2020. Vinhas Velhas means old vines. This is made from over 30 different varieties. The vineyards are on average over 130 years old. This is foot trodden, not cheap though. This comes in $100. They make a Quinta da Manuela that's just the normal. I think you can get that wine for $30 in the US. The Vinhas Velhas is the more expensive wine. I think this is a killer wine. And the cool thing about these wines, when expensive wines, sometimes you taste them, and some people that don't have a lot of experience with wine, like, I don't get why this is expensive. It's not that good. I think everybody is going to love this wine. Do you love Portugal and Portuguese wines like I do? Do you prefer the Douro or do you prefer the Douro? I'd love to hear. Drop it in the comments below.